So, I want you to imagine a seemingly impossible task.
Okay, I'm listening.
Picture taking two massive, like entirely different civilizations with completely conflicting worldviews.
Right.
On one side, you have this ancient, indigenous, nature-based tradition that's just been woven into the fabric of daily life for, thousands of years.
The default setting of the culture, essentially.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have a newly imported, highly structured, incredibly complex foreign philosophy. And your job isn't just to figure out a way to make them, tolerate each other.
Which is hard enough on its own.
Right. Your job is to merge them so perfectly, so seamlessly, that centuries later, people can't even tell where one ends and the other begins.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like an operational nightmare. Usually when civilizations collide like that, history shows us one of two outcomes, right?
Yeah, it's rarely pretty.
Right. Either the more technologically or administratively advanced civilization completely overrides the indigenous one, or you get, well, centuries of friction. You get pushback and parallel societies that just never truly integrate.
You definitely rarely get a seamless, engineered blend.
No, almost never.
Which is exactly what makes our focus for today's deep dive so compelling. We have a really fascinating stack of sources for you today.
I really do.
We are pulling from a deeply researched scholarly paper from Kobe University on the philosophy of law and Japanese history, an incredibly insightful YouTube lecture dissecting Japanese philosophy, an article from the Religion newspaper, and a historical text summary of ancient laws.
And having that diversity of sources gives us a really comprehensive view. I mean, we're going from high-level legal theory all the way down to the physical architecture of the era.
Yeah, and our mission today is to sift through all of this to unpack the strategy of one specific historical figure, Prince Shotoku, operating in the 6th and 7th centuries.
A true visionary.
Absolutely. We're going to explore how he unified the indigenous traditions of Shinto with the imported framework of Buddhism. We will look at what his famous 17-article constitution actually meant by its most famous buzzword, which is harmony.
Or wa.
Right, wa. And we'll see how this move formed the unbreakable bedrock of Japanese spiritual culture that is honestly still operating today.
Yeah, and to really grasp the magnitude of what Prince Shotoku achieved, we have to set the stage first. We need to look closely at the Asuka period in Japan.
Right, because the context is everything here.
Exactly, because during this time, Japan wasn't just dealing with the arrival of new religion. I think that is a very common, very limiting misconception people have.
Wait, so when you say a new religion, my mind goes straight to, different rituals or concepts of the afterlife. But if it wasn't just a spiritual shift, what was actually washing up on their shores?
Well, they were facing a literal tidal wave of Chinese civilization. Buddhism wasn't just a set of spiritual beliefs about enlightenment for them.
Okay, what was it then?
It was the vehicle for an incredibly advanced, highly structured foreign culture. So when Buddhist monks and scholars arrived from the continent, they brought with them new, sophisticated architecture, complex political and bureaucratic systems.
So it's a whole package deal.
Exactly. Written language and a systematic way of thinking that was almost, well, scientific compared to what existed in Japan at the time.
So they're essentially importing a fully fleshed out legal and administrative system that's just kind of disguised as a religion.
Yes.
It's not just a new way to pray. It's a new way to build cities, collect taxes, and govern a population.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. And this massive, structured foreign system was crashing headfirst into Japan's ancient, deeply ingrained Shinto traditions.
Which are very different.
Night and day. Shinto was, and still is really, a nature-worshipping, familial, deeply localized spiritual framework. It didn't have rigid doctrines, it didn't have a centralized bureaucratic hierarchy, and it didn't even have a foundational text like Buddhism did.
Right, no Bible or sutras.
Exactly. It was tied to local clans, local geography, and reverence for nature spirits, or kami. It was simply the air the Japanese people breathed.
So you have this fluid, localized oral tradition meeting a highly codified, centralized, written behemoth.
Yes, the tension was massive.
Which brings us to Prince Shotoku. Because in the YouTube lecture we reviewed, the speaker points out a fascinating detail about how we usually misunderstand Shotoku's greatest work, the 17-article Constitution.
Yeah, the focus usually falls heavily on Article 1, and specifically how the modern world interprets it.
Right. Article 1 famously states harmony is to be valued, or wa, in Japanese. And the source points out that most people, even in Japan today, honestly are taught that this is just a nice kindergarten-level rule.
Like a polite suggestion.
Yeah, everybody get along, let's be polite to our neighbors, or aristocrats, please stop squabbling over land.
Which completely undercuts the actual historical weight of that document. I mean, when you look at the geopolitical pressure Japan was under, with massive, powerful dynasties rising in China like the Sui, and later the Tang Japan needed a centralized state to survive.
They had to get it together.
Right, they couldn't afford a fractured society of local clans anymore. Wasn't some simple human resources policy for the imperial court to keep meetings polite. It was a radical civilizational mandate.
It makes me think of a massive corporate merger.
Okay, how so?
Well, usually, when a huge, structured multinational buys a smaller local startup, the big company completely swallows the smaller one. The startup's branding is erased, their culture's replaced, and they just use the big company's software.
The standard acquisition playbook, yeah.
But Shotoku was attempting the impossible. He was trying to execute a 50-50 merger, where both operating systems run simultaneously without crashing the computer.
The stakes were exactly that high. He recognized that the code of Shinto, the connection to the land, the reverence for ancestors, the indigenous identity, was essential to holding the people together.
Right, you can't just delete that.
Exactly. But he also knew the code of Buddhism, the structured ethics, the advanced civic organization, the broader worldview was absolutely necessary for Japan to survive and thrive on the global stage of the 7th century.
So he needs both.
He was demanding that these two entirely different worldviews dissolve into one another to create a brand new unified Japanese culture.
But I have to push back here for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
When you look at the actual text of the 17-article Constitution, there's a glaring contradiction. Like, if Shotoku really wanted this perfect, balanced fusion of Shinto and Buddhism, why does Article 2 completely ignore Shinto?
Ah, you're referring to the explicit elevation of Buddhist principles right after the call for harmony.
Exactly. Article 2 specifically says, revere the three treasures, and the three treasures are explicitly Buddhist, right? The Buddha, the law, and the priesthood.
That's right.
Shinto isn't mentioned anywhere in that central directive. So didn't he just pick a side? Didn't he just look at the shiny new imported operating system and decide to go with that?
It certainly looks that way on the surface. I mean, it's a very logical question. But the revelation from our sources, particularly the analysis in the religion newspaper, flips this assumption entirely.
Okay.
To understand why Article 2 focuses solely on Buddhism, you really have to understand Prince Shotoku's literal day job.
Let's look at his resume then. What was his actual role?
So, Shotoku wasn't just a bureaucratic politician. He was the crown prince of the imperial family. And the primary undeniable duty of the imperial family, like the source of their entire political legitimacy, was conducting Shinto rituals.
Oh, well.
They were the ultimate chief priests of Shinto. Their authority came directly from worshiping the imperial ancestors and the highest nature gods, like the sun goddess Amaterasu.
So he is speaking from the absolute center of the Shinto establishment.
He is the embodiment of it. Shinto wasn't an alternative religion you opted into. It was their absolute default state of being.
Ah, which brings in that brilliant analogy from the YouTube lecture. The speaker noted that because Shinto was so implicitly understood and deeply ingrained in the Japanese identity, mentioning it in the Constitution would be like writing a law saying Japanese people have black hair.
Exactly. You don't legislate the obvious. You don't need a constitutional amendment to tell the sky to be blue or to mandate that people continue doing the ancestral rituals they've done for a millennium.
That completely changes how you read the text. By writing, revere the three treasures, he isn't discarding Shinto in favor of Buddhism at all.
Far from it. By explicitly elevating Buddhism in Article 2, Shotoku was officially raising this new, foreign, science-like civilization to the exact same level of respect as their unquestioned, unspoken indigenous traditions.
He was establishing equality without having to explicitly state it. Like, he didn't need to say respect Shinto because that was a given. He just needed to say, hey, treat this complex new foreign system with the exact same reverence you already give to everything else we do.
And as the YouTube source points out, it is incredibly rare in human history for a leader of a dominant, established civilization to look at a foreign imported culture and say, this is entirely equal to us and we must blend with it.
Usually it's a completely different story.
Right. Usually the approach is either violent conquest, forced assimilation, or rigid isolationism. Shotoku chose synthesis.
So philosophically, on parchment, this is a brilliant maneuver. But I keep wondering how this high-level political theory actually played out in the dirt and wood of reality.
The practical application.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to write a constitution of the capital. It's another thing entirely to convince regular farmers and local clans to change how they view the universe. How did the average person experience this fusion on the ground?
Well, we actually have physical evidence of this strategy, and it's quite striking. The religion newspaper article points us to Horyuji, the incredibly famous Buddhist temple complex built by Prince Shotoku.
Okay.
If you walk onto the grounds of this ancient Buddhist temple, you will find torii gates standing right there among the Buddhist architecture.
And for those who might not be familiar with Japanese architecture, torii gates are those iconic, usually red wooden archways. You see them everywhere in photos of Japan.
They are the ultimate, undeniable symbols of Shinto. They literally mark the boundary between the mundane, everyday world and the sacred space of the kami, the Shinto spirits.
And they're just sitting there inside a complex dedicated to a foreign religion.
Yes. The site was intentionally designed to function as a unified space. A local person would go there to pray to the universal Buddha for enlightenment or better karma, but in the exact same physical location, they would pay respects to the local land gods, the earth deities of Shinto.
So the sacred geography itself was forcing the fusion. And Shotoku didn't just force this fusion geographically by putting torii gates at Buddhist temples. He engineered it into the literal bones of the buildings.
The architecture itself.
Yeah, to get traditionalists to accept this massive new Buddhist pagoda at Horyuji, he didn't just use new materials. The Kobe University paper highlights an incredible detail discovered through dendrochronology tree ring dating.
Ah, yes, you're referring to the central heart pillar of the pagoda.
Exactly. The central wooden pillar that anchors Horyuji's iconic pagoda didn't actually originate there. It came from Hogoji, an older temple built by Shotoku.
Right.
The tree rings show the wood for that original pillar was cut all the way back in the winter of 593 or 594 AD. When they constructed Horyuji later, they physically moved that massive ancient pillar to serve as the core of the new structure.
It's a staggering logistical and symbolic choice. The physical wood literally mirrors the spiritual continuity he was trying to engineer. He took the old foundation and placed it at the dead center of the new, modern structure.
But even with clever architecture and old wooden pillars, you still have a massive theological problem, don't you?
Of course.
Like if a Buddhist monk says there is a universal cosmic order, and a Shinto priest says the local mountain is a god, eventually those two ideas are going to clash. How did they prevent people from feeling like they had to choose?
That physical merging required a very specific theological framework to back it up, ensuring people wouldn't reject the new ideas as heretical. This is where we see the emergence of a concept deeply explored in our sources called Honji-sujaku.
Okay, let's break this down because the mechanics of this are fascinating. It feels like the ultimate theological de-escalation.
It is a brilliant psychological and religious mechanism. Honji-sujaku essentially translates to the idea that the native Shinto gods, the kami of the mountains, the rivers, the forests, were not false gods or demons.
Which is usually what happens when a new religion comes to town.
Right. Instead, they were explained as local physical manifestations avatars, or gongen of the universal Buddhist deities.
Oh, wow. So if you are a local farmer, the officials aren't coming to your village to smash your shrine and tell you your ancestors were wrong?
Not at all. The official stance became, your local mountain god is actually just the bodhisattva of compassion, taking a form that you, in your specific local environment, can understand and relate to.
That is so clever.
For example, the supreme Shinto sun goddess, Amaterasu, was eventually equated with the cosmic Buddha Vairocana.
That is wild to think about compared to Western history. I mean, when a new religion arrives in so many parts of the world, the immediate default stance is, my God is real and your God is a fake idol that must be destroyed.
Almost universally, yes.
But under Honji-sujaku, the framework becomes, your God is actually just my God wearing a different outfit.
It validates the indigenous belief entirely while seamlessly integrating it into the new, broader cosmic framework. It allows for absolute syncretism.
So you don't experience the cognitive dissonance of feeling like you are betraying your family's history to participate in the new state religion. Okay, so we've talked about 7th century geopolitical pressure, ancient wooden pillars, and ingenious theological workarounds. But we need to connect this to the bigger picture. Why does this matter to you, listening to this deep dive right now? What is the actual legacy of this merger?
Well, it matters because this specific historical moment forged a cultural DNA that is incredibly unique, and its effects ripple through almost every aspect of Japanese society that we recognize today.
How so?
The YouTube source argues that this seamless blending, where the origin of a belief becomes entirely indistinguishable from the whole, created what the speaker calls a spiritual civilization.
Meaning a society that fundamentally rejects the black and white binary of this or that.
Exactly. Because of Prince Shotoku's framework, Japan was able to adopt the rigorous philosophical and administrative aspects of Buddhism, which they absolutely needed for state building and international relations, while keeping the familial, nature-based, emotional heart of Shinto.
And what did that actually produce in the culture?
Well, the sources note that this highly sophisticated, syncretic mindset is what eventually gave birth to things like Bushido centuries later.
Let's walk through that causality. Because how do you get from a 7th century religious merger to the samurai code?
Think about what a samurai requires psychologically. They need the Buddhist acceptance of impermanence and death. They need that ascetic discipline to detach from their own ego.
Right.
But they also need the Shinto devotion to duty, to their specific lord, and to the physical land they are protecting.
Oh, I see.
If you force a mind to choose between universal detachment and local devotion, the samurai identity fractures. But because Shotoku's system trained the culture to hold multiple truths at once, to see them as different expressions of the same reality, the samurai could seamlessly blend Buddhist detachment with Shinto loyalty.
That makes so much sense. And it wasn't just the warrior class either, right?
Yeah.
The Kobe University paper takes this a step further, looking at how this religious synthesis trickled down into the daily lives of regular people, specifically focusing on the ethos of the artisan and the Kyoto townspeople.
Yeah, the paper makes a compelling argument about that famously diligent, craftsmanship-focused, and harmonious ethos we associate with the Japanese public today. It didn't just appear out of nowhere, it is a direct descendant of this synthesis.
How does philosophy turn into woodworking, though?
Well, Buddhism introduced the idea of repetitive ascetic dedication, doing one specific thing with intense mindfulness until you achieve a state of enlightenment.
Okay, focus and repetition.
Right. And Shinto brought the idea that kami, or spirits, reside in physical materials, like the grain of the wood or the clay of a pot.
Oh, the spirit in the material itself.
Exactly. So when a Kyoto craftsman sat down to build a cabinet, he wasn't just assembling furniture, he was applying rigorous Buddhist discipline to honor the Shinto spirit inherent within the wood itself.
That's a beautiful way to think about labor.
It really is. The drive for spiritual perfection merged with the desire for physical, material harmony. It created a society deeply invested in both the transcendent quality of their work and the localized harmony of their community.
And you still see this framework operating flawlessly today. It's why it is completely normal in modern Japan for a family to go to a Shinto shrine to celebrate a new birth or ring in the new year, and then have a Buddhist monk perform a funeral for a relative.
There is zero sense of contradiction in those actions for them.
Which is fascinating because to a Western, purely monotheistic mindset, oscillating between two different religious frameworks might look like a lack of conviction or theological confusion.
It might seem contradictory, yeah.
But based on what we're learning, it's the exact opposite. It's the result of a highly engineered 1,400-year-old constitutional mandate that explicitly designed flexibility into the culture.
Shotoku took the inevitable clash of foreign progress and indigenous tradition and essentially wrote a cultural algorithm to ensure they would forever enhance rather than destroy each other.
So to summarize the immense ground we've covered today, Prince Shotoku wasn't just a politician trying to balance a budget or appease a few angry aristocrats. He was a visionary civilizational architect. He looked at a collision of worldviews that should have torn his country apart, and instead he turned it into a masterpiece of cultural harmony. He proved that it is entirely possible to absorb a massive, complex new system without erasing the soul of the old one.
He built a society that doesn't just tolerate contradiction, but actually utilizes it to become stronger and more adaptable.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Throughout this deep dive, we've looked at how Japan integrated the complex foreign operating system of Buddhism while retaining its human, localized Shinto heart.
A very successful integration.
It leaves you wondering about the next great cultural collision we are facing globally right now. I mean, as we rapidly integrate artificial intelligence into every single aspect of our lives, we are confronting an entirely new, foreign, and highly structured logic system.
A very modern tidal wave.
Exactly. So instead of fighting it, or letting it completely overwrite our human intuition, how do we pull a Prince Shotoku? What is the modern Hanji Sujaku, the modern theological, philosophical hack that will allow us to seamlessly merge the cold algorithm with the human soul without losing who we fundamentally are?
It is arguably the defining challenge of our era, and perhaps a 1,400-year-old constitution holds the blueprint we need.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.